The house on Crescent Hill didn't look like it belonged to a man who made people disappear. White shutters, ivy crawling up brick, the color of old honey. A garden where roses grew fat and red, tended by hands that knew the difference between care and control. From the street, it looked like money that had learned to whisper, the kind of wealth that didn't need gates because everyone already knew not to get too close. Inside, the kitchen smelled like basil and simmering tomatoes every Sunday. That's where you'd find them, two women moving around each other like dancers who'd learned the same choreography over decades. One white-haired and soft at the edges, flower on her cardigan. The other, darker-skinned and graceful, her hands quick and certain as she kneaded dough on the marble counter. Rosa Castellano, 73. Widow of a man whose name still made grown men lower their voices. Mother to a son who'd inherited more than just his father's jawline, and Grace Thompson, 68. Hired 32 years ago to clean. Stayed for reasons that had stopped being about money somewhere around year 3. "You're putting too much salt again," Grace said, not looking up from the dough. Rosa laughed, that soft, knowing sound that made the kitchen feel smaller, warmer. "My mother's recipe has never been wrong." "Your mother couldn't taste anything after 60? You told me that yourself." Disrespectful. Honest. Rosa added less salt. She always did. This was their language, the small corrections, the gentle arguments that weren't arguments at all. 32 years had worn down the edges between employer and employee until the shape that remained was harder to name. Sister wasn't quite right. Friend felt too casual. Family was the word Rosa used, though she was careful about who heard her say it. Grace never used the word at all. The afternoon light came through the kitchen windows at an angle that turned everything golden, the copper pots hanging above the stove, the wine in Rosa's glass, Grace's forearms as she worked the dough. Outside, the city sprawled below the hill like something conquered and forgotten. You couldn't see the violence from here. That was the point. "He's coming for dinner tonight," Rosa said, too casual. Grace's hands didn't stop moving. "I know. I haven't seen him in 3 weeks. I know that too." Rosa poured herself more wine. The bottle was already half empty, and it wasn't yet 4. "You'll stay." Not a question. It never was. Grace folded the dough one last time, set it aside to rise, and wiped her hands on her apron. "I'll stay." This was the lie they lived inside, that these Sundays were normal, that the man who would arrive at 7, smelling like expensive cologne and unspoken consequences, was just a son coming home for his mother's cooking, that Grace was just the help, staying late out of loyalty or habit or whatever convenient word made it easier to sleep at night. The truth was more complicated. The truth usually is. Rosa had hired Grace the same month her husband was killed. Not murdered. Carlo Castellano's death certificate said heart attack, and no one with any sense questioned it. But Rosa knew. She'd known the moment she heard her son's voice on the phone that night. Too calm, too certain. 26 years old and already fluent in the language of necessary violence. She'd needed someone in the house who didn't know that language, someone whose presence felt like proof that not everything she'd built was rotting from the inside. Grace needed the job. Single mother, 2 sons. A nursing degree she couldn't finish because her own mother got sick, and then sicker, and then gone. Life had taught her that survival meant taking what was offered and not asking too many questions about where it came from. So she cleaned, and Rosa paid her well. Too well, Grace thought at first, until she understood that the money was for more than dusting and laundry. It was for witnessing. For being the kind of person Rosa could still be human around. The years stacked up softly. Grace's sons grew up with Christmas bonuses that paid for new shoes and school supplies. Rosa's son grew into his father's empire with the kind of efficiency that made old men nervous. And every Sunday, these 2 women made dinner together and pretended the world outside the kitchen wasn't the one they actually lived in. Grace learned not to ask about the men in dark suits who sometimes waited in the driveway. Rosa learned not to apologize for them. It worked because they both needed it to. The dough rose, the sauce simmered, the sun dropped lower, turning the kitchen amber and rust. "You'll use the good plates," Rosa said. "I always do. And you'll sit with us." Grace's hands stilled at the sink. This was new. "Rosa, you'll sit with us," Rosa repeated, softer now, almost pleading. "It's been 32 years, Grace. You're not the help anymore." Grace dried her hands slowly, carefully, the way you move when you're trying not to say the wrong thing. "Your son might not see it that way. Then he'll learn." The words hung there, brave and foolish at once. Grace turned to look at her. This woman who treated her with more kindness than most of her own blood ever had. Who'd paid for her youngest son's tuition without being asked? Who'd held her hand at her grandson's baptism and cried like it was her own family being blessed? And Grace felt the floor shift beneath her, the way it does when you realize something beautiful is about to break. "Rosa," she said quietly, Don't what? Don't make me choose between being grateful and being smart." Rosa's face did something complicated, hurt and defiant, and old all at once. She set down her wineglass with too much care, the way you do when your hands aren't steady. "You think I don't know what I'm asking? I think you love your son more than you want to admit. And I think he doesn't love anything more than what his father left him." The kitchen felt smaller now, the light less golden. Rosa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "He's still my son. I know. And you're—" She stopped, started over. "You're the only person in this house who doesn't want something from me." Grace crossed the kitchen and took Rosa's hand, held it the way you hold something fragile. "Then don't make me sit at his table," she said. "Let me stay what I am. Let that be enough." But Rosa was shaking her head, stubborn as always, tears catching in the creases around her eyes. "It's not enough. Not anymore. I'm 73 years old, Grace. I'm tired of pretending you're not the person I call when I can't sleep. I'm tired of my own cowardice." And there it was, the crack they'd both been ignoring, the fault line they'd built their whole careful world on top of. Outside, a car door closed. Expensive, heavy, final, 7 o'clock. Grace pulled her hand back slowly, smoothed her apron, became smaller, quieter, the way she'd learned to do decades ago when being invisible meant being safe. "Set the table," she said. "I'll get the wine." Rosa nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Neither of them said what they both knew. That dinner was going to cost more than either of them had planned to spend. The front door opened, closed. Footsteps in the hall, confident, unhurried, the sound of a man who'd never had to knock. "Ma?" His voice carried the same warmth his father's had. That was the dangerous part, how love and violence could wear the same face, use the same tone. Rosa straightened, smiled, became the mother she needed to be. "In the kitchen, baby." Grace stayed at the counter, hands busy with nothing, eyes down. And the last ordinary moment ended quietly, the way most endings do. Vincent Castellano filled doorways the way his father had. Not with size, but with certainty. 41. Trim build under a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Dark hair going silver at the temples in that way that made men look distinguished instead of old. His mother's eyes, his father's hands. He kissed Rosa on both cheeks, European style, the gesture smooth as ritual. "You look tired," Rosa said, touching his face. "I'm fine." "You're lying." He smiled, sharp and brief, like sun through storm clouds. "I learned from the best." His eyes moved past her, landed on Grace at the counter. Something flickered across his face. Not quite recognition, not quite dismissal. Something in between. "Grace." She looked up, met his eyes for exactly the right amount of time, long enough to be respectful, short enough to remember her place. "Mr. Castellano, welcome home." He nodded, dismissed her with the gesture, turned back to his mother. This was how it had always been. Grace existed in the house the way furniture did, necessary, familiar, unexamined. Vincent had grown up with her presence, had eaten meals she'd helped prepare, had probably been cleaned up by her hands when he was young enough to need it. But he'd never really seen her, not the way his mother did. That was going to be the problem. They moved to the dining room. Grace set the table with the good china, white with gold trim, patterns like lace made permanent. Rosa had set 3 places. Vincent noticed immediately. "We're expecting someone else." "No," Rosa said, pouring wine into crystal glasses. "Grace is joining us." The silence that followed had weight. Vincent looked at the 3rd place setting, looked at his mother, looked at Grace, who'd gone very still by the sideboard. "Since when?" "Since tonight." Rosa's voice was light, but her hand on the wine bottle wasn't steady. Vincent's jaw did something subtle, a tightness that suggested teeth pressed together. He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that men in his profession used before making decisions. "Ma." "Sit down, baby. Dinner's ready." "Ma." "Vincent, sit." He sat. But the ease had gone out of his posture. Now he looked like what he was, a man running calculations, measuring risks, deciding what kind of problem this was going to become. Grace served the salad. Her hands didn't shake, but only because she'd learned decades ago how to keep them still when men were watching. Rosa gestured to the 3rd chair. "Grace, please." Grace hesitated. Every instinct she'd honed over 68 years screamed at her to stay standing, stay serving, stay safe in the role that had kept her alive this long. But Rosa was looking at her with those soft, stubborn eyes, and 32 years of kindness was a debt Grace didn't know how to refuse. She sat. The chair felt wrong beneath her, too soft, too visible. Vincent cut his salad with precise, controlled movements. Didn't look up. "How's business?" Rosa asked, too bright. "Fine. Just fine. Ma, I don't talk about business at dinner. You know that. You used to tell me everything. I used to be 12. Rosa laughed, but it sounded tired. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I miss that boy sometimes." Vincent's face softened. Just a fraction. Just enough to show the son still living underneath the boss. "He's still here? Is he? What kind of question is that?" Rosa pulled her hand back, drank her wine. "The kind a mother asks when she hasn't seen her son in 3 weeks. I've been busy. You're always busy. That's what keeping the family together looks like." The word hung there, family, and Grace felt it like a stone in her chest. She knew what it meant in this house. Not the version civilians used, all blood and love and obligation. The other version, the one that came with rules and territories and consequences for breaking either. Vincent's family was the reason Rosa had needed someone like Grace in the first place. Someone outside it, someone clean. They ate in careful silence. The food was perfect. It always was. Rosa had taught Grace how to make Sunday. Gravy the way her own mother had taught her, with patience and too much garlic and love that went deeper than recipes. But tonight, it all tasted like waiting. Vincent finished his salad, set his fork down with quiet precision. "Grace," he said, not looking at her, still watching his mother. "How long have you worked for my mother?" Grace set down her own fork. 32 years, Mr. Castellano." "Long time." "Yes, sir. You must know this family pretty well by now." The question wasn't really a question. "I know your mother," Grace said carefully. "She's been good to me. And my father, you knew him too." Past tense, deliberate. "I did." "What did you think of him?" Rosa's fork clattered against her plate. "Vincent, I'm just asking, Ma, just making conversation." But his eyes were still on Grace, dark and measuring, and she understood that this was a test. Everything with men like him was a test. She could feel Rosa's panic across the table, could feel the trap closing around them both. "Your father," Grace said slowly, "was a complicated man, but he loved your mother. That much was always clear. It was the truth. It was also safe. Threading that needle had kept her employed for 3 decades. Vincent nodded, picked up his wine. "And me? What do you think of me, Grace?" "Vincent, stop it. It's fine, Ma. I'm curious. Grace has been in this house my whole life. She's practically family, right? Isn't that what you always say?" The words were light. The meaning wasn't. Grace met his eyes finally, held them. "I think," she said quietly, "that you're your father's son, and I think your mother worries about you the way mothers do." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or irritation, or both. He leaned back in his chair, still watching her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or discard. "You've never asked for anything," he said. "In 32 years, never once came to me with a problem, a son who needed help, a bill you couldn't pay, nothing. Your mother pays me fairly. That's not what I mean." Grace knew what he meant. In his world, loyalty was currency. Silence was a commodity. People who worked close to power always wanted something eventually. Protection, favors, a way up or out. Grace had never asked because asking meant owing. And owing men like Vincent Castellano meant becoming part of what they were. "I'm grateful for what I have," Grace said. "Gratitude's cheap." "Not the way I was raised." Vincent smiled, thin and sharp and almost genuine. "Maybe that's why my mother likes you." Rosa's voice cut through harder now. "I don't like her, Vincent. I love her. There's a difference." The room went still. Vincent turned to his mother slowly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Don't ma me. Grace has been in this house longer than most of your soldiers have been alive. She's cooked for you, cleaned for you, helped raise you, and you. Sit here treating her like she's furniture. I'm treating her like an employee. She's not just an employee, she's family." There it was, said out loud, made real. Vincent's face did something complicated. Anger and confusion and hurt all tangled up together. He pushed back from the table, stood. "Can I talk to you? Alone?" Rosa stood too, defiant. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Grace. Ma, please. The please was quieter, almost a plea. Rosa's face softened. She glanced at Grace, apologetic, frightened, still stubborn. I'll clear the plates, Grace said, standing quickly. Take your time. She gathered dishes with practiced efficiency, not meeting anyone's eyes. Vincent and Rosa moved toward the kitchen, voices already rising before they were even through the door. Grace stood alone in the dining room, holding plates that cost more than her first car, and felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Through the kitchen door, their voices carried. Embarrassing me? Embarrassing you? Is that what this is about? Think people will say? Don't care what people say. You should... Grace set the plates down carefully, walked to the sideboard, stood there with her hands pressed flat against the dark wood, breathing slowly, evenly, the way you do when panic is waiting just behind your ribs. 32 years. She'd been careful for 32 years. And now Rosa was going to break them both, trying to prove a point about kindness. The voices got louder, a glass shattered. Rosa's cry, not pain, just shock. Grace's hands curled into fists. She'd spent her whole life learning how to be small, how to survive in rooms where people like her weren't meant to take up space, how to be grateful for scraps and call them blessings. But Rosa had never treated her like scraps. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe kindness was its own kind of violence when it forced you to want things you were never supposed to have. The kitchen door swung open. Vincent came through first, jaw tight, eyes dark. He stopped when he saw Grace standing there. For a moment, they just looked at each other. This isn't about you, he said. Grace nodded. I know. My mother, he stopped, started again. She doesn't understand how things work. She understands fine. She just doesn't care. Vincent's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. That makes her dangerous. That makes her decent. Same thing in my world. He looked at her for another long moment, and Grace saw something in his face she hadn't expected. Exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying too much for too long, with no one to share the weight. I'm not the villain here, he said quietly. I never said you were. You didn't have to. He walked past her, through the dining room, toward the front door, stopped with his hand on the knob. Grace, she turned. My mother loves you. I can see that. But love doesn't change what we are, and what we are doesn't allow for... He gestured vaguely at the dinner table, the third-place setting, the illusion Rosa had tried to build. This. What are you, Mr. Castellano? He smiled, sad and sharp at once. Careful. Then he was gone. Grace stood in the empty dining room as his car pulled away, expensive engine fading into the night. Rosa appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. He doesn't understand. He understands perfectly. That's the problem. Rosa crossed the room, took Grace's hands in hers. Stay, she said. Please, don't let him chase you away. Grace looked down at their joined hands, one pair pale and soft, the other darker and marked by decades of work. They fit together the way they always had. I'm not going anywhere, Grace said. But they both heard the lie. The roses outside smelled like they were dying. That's how September works in a city built on hills. Everything beautiful starts rotting from the center out. And neither of them had noticed until the smell got too strong to ignore. The calls started 2 days later. Not from Vincent. He was too smart for that. From his people. The ones who handled details, problems, small adjustments to keep the family's world running smooth. First call came Tuesday morning. A man's voice, polite and empty. Ms. Thompson? This is regarding the Castellano residence. Grace had been folding laundry in her own apartment, a small 2-bedroom in a neighborhood that was trying hard not to slide backward. The phone almost never rang anymore. Her sons were grown and busy. Her friends were few and careful. Yes? We wanted to inform you that Mrs. Castellano will be transitioning to a different arrangement. Your services will no longer be required after this month. Grace's hands stilled on the pillowcase she'd been folding. Mrs. Castellano didn't mention anything. Mrs. Castellano doesn't handle personnel decisions anymore. Mr. Castellano does. I see. Your severance will be generous. We appreciate your years of service. The line went dead. Grace stood in her small living room, holding laundry that smelled like the detergent she'd been buying for 40 years, and felt something inside her shift and settle like bones after breaking. She called Rosa, no answer. She called again an hour later, and again that evening. On the third call, Rosa picked up. Her voice sounded far away, muffled. Grace? They called me. Vincent's people. Silence. Rosa? Rose's voice cracked. He says it's for the best, that things have gotten too complicated. So that's it? 32 years and he makes one call? He's trying to protect the family. I'm not a threat to his family. You're not... Rosa stopped, started crying softly. You're not the threat, Grace. I am. He thinks I'm getting old, sentimental, making mistakes. Loving someone isn't a mistake. It is in his world. Grace sat down on her couch, still holding the phone, staring at nothing. What do you want me to do? She asked quietly. I want you to stay. I want you to tell him he's wrong. I want... Rosa's breath hitched. I want things to be the way they were. They were never the way you thought they were. The truth sat between them like broken glass. I know, Rosa whispered. I think I always knew. They stayed on the phone without speaking for a long time. Sometimes love sounds like silence, like two people breathing together in the dark. I'll come Sunday, Grace said finally, for dinner, one more time. You don't have to. I want to. Another pause. Then Rose's voice, small and broken. Thank you. After they hung up, Grace sat in her apartment as the afternoon light died. She thought about all the Sundays, all the dinners, all the small kindnesses that had added up to something she'd been too afraid to name. She'd loved Rosa Castellano, not romantically, not even like family, really, but the way you love someone who sees you clearly and chooses to stay anyway. And Vincent was going to take that away because it didn't fit into the shape of his world. Grace had survived a lot in 68 years. Racism that showed its teeth and racism that wore a smile. Poverty that made you choose between medicine and groceries. Loss that came in waves. Her mother, her marriage, her dreams of being more than she'd been allowed to become. She'd survived by being smart, by staying small, by taking what was offered and never asking for more. But maybe that was just another kind of dying. Slow and quiet and so gradual you didn't notice until you looked up one day and realized you disappeared. The second call came Thursday. Different voice, same message, sharper edges. Ms. Thompson, this is a courtesy reminder that your employment terminates at month's end. Mr. Castellano wanted to ensure you understood the terms of your severance. You'll receive 6 months' salary. In exchange, you'll sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding anything you may have witnessed during your employment. Witnessed? It's standard procedure, nothing personal. Everything about it was personal. And if I don't sign? The voice on the other end didn't change tone, didn't need to. Then the severance offer changes, substantially. Grace understood. This was how men like Vincent operated. Generosity as weapon, kindness as threat. I'll think about it, she said. Don't think too long. Click. Grace stood in her kitchen. Linoleum from 1987. Cabinet doors that didn't quite close right. A window that looked out on brick and fire escapes. This was her life. Small and safe, and hers. Rose's world was something else. Something larger and more dangerous and built on foundations Grace had pretended not to see. But, God, it had felt good to be seen. To be wanted. To matter to someone whose life was bigger than survival. Friday, Rosa called her. He wants to meet with you. Grace felt her stomach drop. Vincent? He says he wants to explain. To make things right. Men like him don't make things right. They make them quiet. Grace, please. Maybe if you just talk to him and say what? That I'll disappear quietly? That 32 years means nothing? No, Rosa's voice broke. I don't know. I don't know what to do. Grace closed her eyes, felt the weight of every year, every Sunday, every small moment of grace she'd been given by this woman who didn't understand the cost of kindness in a cruel world. Don't do anything, Grace said. Let me handle this. How? Good question. Grace hung up and sat at her kitchen table for a long time. Outside, the city did what cities do. Kept moving, kept breathing, kept being exactly what it was, regardless of the small human dramas playing out in apartments and houses and spaces between. She thought about her sons. Both grown now, both living their own lives. One was a teacher in Baltimore. The other worked IT for a hospital in Atlanta. Good men. Safe men. Men who'd never have to navigate the complicated mathematics of power and survival the way she had. She'd built that safety for them, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, Sunday by Sunday. And now, Vincent Castellano was trying to pay her to pretend it had all meant nothing. Grace opened her laptop, started writing. Not a letter, not a confession, just documentation, dates, names, things she'd seen over 32 years of being invisible in a house where powerful men came and went. She didn't know what she was going to do with it, probably nothing. probably just delete it tomorrow when fear caught up with anger. But tonight, in her small kitchen with her unreliable cabinets and her secondhand laptop, Grace Thompson wrote down the truth. Because maybe that was the only power people like her ever really had. Saturday passed in a fog. Grace cleaned her own apartment with the same precision she'd brought to Rosa's house for 3 decades, scrubbed grout until her knuckles ached, organized closets that didn't need organizing, cooked food she didn't eat, anything to keep her hands busy, anything to avoid thinking about Sunday. But Sunday came anyway. It always does. Grace arrived at the house on Crescent Hill at 5 o'clock, 3 hours before dinner. She still had her key. Rosa had given it to her 15 years ago, after the second cancer scare, when Rosa had wanted someone besides Vincent to be able to get in if something went wrong. Just in case, Rosa had said, "You're the only one I trust." Grace had carried that key like a promise. She let herself in quietly. The house smelled like it always did, old wood and lemon polish and something floral from Rosa's endless attempts at decorating. Photos lined the hallway. Carlo Castellano's stern face, Vincent at various ages, always serious, even as a child. And there, near the back, a photo of Rosa and Grace in the garden, both laughing, both covered in dirt from planting bulbs that hadn't survived the winter. Grace stopped in front of that photo, touched the frame. "Grace?" She turned. Rosa stood in the kitchen doorway, wearing the blue dress she saved for special occasions. Her hair was done, lipstick on. She looked small and determined and frightened. "You're early," Rosa said. "I wanted to help with dinner." "You don't have to. I want to." They stood in the hallway, neither moving, both understanding that this was ritual now, the last performance of a play they'd been rehearsing for 32 years. Rosa's face crumpled. She crossed the distance between them and pulled Grace into a hug that felt like drowning. "I'm so sorry," Rosa whispered into Grace's shoulder. "I'm so sorry I wasn't braver. I should have stood up to him. I should have..." "Shh." Grace held her, this woman who'd shown her more kindness than she'd probably deserved. "You did what you could. It wasn't enough. It was everything." They held each other in the hallway while the afternoon light turned amber and gold. Two women who'd built something real inside something false and were about to watch it end. Finally, Rosa pulled back, wiped her eyes, tried to smile. "Come on, let's cook." They moved through the kitchen like they always had. Rosa chopping vegetables, Grace working the stove. The radio played something old and soft, Sinatra maybe, or one of those singers who made heartbreak sound like silk. "He's bringing someone," Rosa said quietly. Grace looked up from the pan. "Who?" "Anthony, I don't know what you call him, his advisor, his enforcer. I've never liked him." Grace knew Anthony, had seen him in the house a dozen times over the years. Thin face, dead eyes, hands that moved like they were always looking for something to hurt. If Vincent was bringing Anthony, this wasn't just dinner. This was a message. "Rosa, I know what it means." Rosa's hands shook as she sliced tomatoes. "But this is still my house, and you're still welcome here." "Am I?" Rosa looked up, fierce despite the tears. "Always." They cooked, the house filled with the smell of garlic and basil and bread warming in the oven. All the old Sunday rituals, performed one last time. At 7, the door opened. Vincent came in first. Suit perfectly tailored, face carefully blank. Behind him, Anthony, watching everything with those flat, calculating eyes. "Ma?" Vincent kissed Rosa's cheek, nodded at Grace. "Grace?" "Mr. Castellano." Anthony smiled, thin and joyless. "Smells good, Mrs. Castellano." "Thank you, Anthony." Rosa's voice was cold. She'd never bothered to hide that she disliked him. They moved to the dining room. Rosa had set 4 places this time. Grace started to go to the kitchen. "Sit," Rosa said. Vincent's jaw tightened. Sit. Down." Grace sat. So did Vincent. Anthony took the 4th chair, still smiling that empty smile. Rosa served dinner herself, placed plates in front of each of them with deliberate care, poured wine into crystal glasses that caught the chandelier light. Then she sat, raised her glass. "To family," she said, looking directly at Vincent. "To the people we choose to love, even when it's inconvenient." Vincent didn't raise his glass, neither did Anthony. Grace lifted hers slightly, met Rosa's eyes across the table. They drank. The meal began in silence, fork against china. Wine glasses set down too carefully. The sound of 4 people pretending everything was normal. "Grace," Anthony said, cutting his meat with surgical precision. "Vincent tells me you've been with the family a long time." 32 years. That's impressive. Loyalty's rare these days. So is decency. Anthony's knife stilled. He looked up, smile widening slightly. Is that directed at someone specific? Anthony? Vincent's voice carried warning. I'm just making conversation. No, Grace said quietly. You're trying to make me afraid. It's what you do. It's all you do. The room went very still. Vincent set down his fork carefully. Grace, I'm not afraid of you. Grace looked at Anthony, then at Vincent. Either of you. I've been afraid my whole life, of not having enough, of losing what little I had, of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. But you know what? I'm 68 years old. I'm tired of being afraid. Rosa reached across the table, took Grace's hand. You don't have to do this, Rosa whispered. Yes, I do. Grace pulled her hand back gently, stood, looked at Vincent. Your mother is the best person I've ever known, and you treat her like she's a problem you have to manage. Like loving someone outside your organization is weakness instead of the only thing keeping her human. Vincent's face was stone. You don't understand. I understand fine. Your father built an empire on violence and called it family, and you inherited it because that's what sons do. But your mother? She's tried for 40 years to find something clean inside all that blood, something worth saving. Careful, Anthony said softly. Grace ignored him. She found it in kindness, in treating people like they mattered, in making Sunday dinners for a son who barely visits and a woman who's supposed to stay invisible. And you're going to take that away from her because it doesn't fit into your world. My world is the only thing keeping her safe. No, your world is the only thing putting her in danger. Vincent stood. His face was hard, angry, but underneath Grace could see something else, hurt. The same expression he'd worn as a child when Rosa had been too tired to read him bedtime stories. You need to leave, he said quietly. Vincent? Rosa stood too, desperate. Now, Grace. Grace nodded. She'd known this was how it would end. Some truths cost everything. She walked to the kitchen, got her purse, came back through the dining room one last time. Rosa was crying. Vincent was staring at his plate. Anthony was watching everything with those dead eyes, probably already planning how to make sure Grace stayed quiet. Grace stopped at Rosa's chair, kissed her cheek. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. Grace, please. It's okay. It really is. Grace walked to the front door, put her hand on the knob. The severance? Vincent called out. You'll sign the papers. Grace turned, looked at him. No. His eyes went dark. That's not smart. I don't need your money, and I don't need to sign anything promising to forget what I've seen. Grace, what are you going to do, Vincent? Kill me? Make me disappear? I'm 68 years old. I clean houses for a living. Nobody's going to care what I say. Then why not take the money? Grace smiled, sad and true. Because your mother taught me that some things are worth more than being comfortable. She taught me that love isn't something you buy. It's something you earn by being brave. She opened the door, stopped, looked back at Rosa one more time. You were brave, she said. Even if he never sees it, you were so brave. Then she left. The cool September air hit her face like baptism. She walked down the driveway, past the roses that were dying, past the ivy that climbed towards something it would never reach. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. She felt electric with fear and relief, and something that might have been freedom. Behind her, through the kitchen window, she could see them. Vincent and Rosa and Anthony, frozen in that beautiful house with its perfect furniture and its poisoned foundation. Grace got in her car, started the engine, drove away from Crescent Hill for the last time. She cried the whole way home, but they weren't the tears she expected. Not grief, not loss, something else. Something closer to release. 3 months passed like water through fingers. Grace's severance never came. She hadn't expected it to. Men like Vincent Castellano didn't reward defiance with generosity, but she was fine. She'd been saving for 32 years. Her apartment was paid off. Her needs were small. And there were other houses that needed cleaning. Other families that valued discretion and consistency. She didn't go back to Crescent Hill, didn't drive past it or look at old photos or let herself remember too much about Sunday dinners and gardens and the way Rosa's laugh used to fill the kitchen. Some endings you have to let be final, but Rosa called. Not often, maybe once every few weeks. They didn't talk about Vincent or the family or what had been lost. They talked about small things, books they were reading, weather, Rosa's garden. The roses didn't survive, Rosa said one Tuesday in December. I don't know what I did wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, Grace said. Some things just don't make it through winter. Silence on the line, then Rosa's voice soft. I miss you. I miss you too. He won't let me visit, says it's not safe, that you might be talking to people. I'm not. I know, but he doesn't trust like that. He only trusts what he can control. Grace stood at her window, looking out at the city, brick and fire escapes and lives stacked on top of each other like cards waiting to fall. Are you okay, Rosa? I don't know. I feel like I'm living in a house full of ghosts, like everything I built just evaporated. You built love. That doesn't evaporate. Doesn't it? Grace didn't have an answer for that. They talked a little longer. Rosa told her about Christmas plans. Vincent was coming for dinner, bringing his lieutenant and some business associates. The house would be full but empty. I'm making lasagna, Rosa said, the way you taught me. You were always better at it than me. Liar. They laughed. It sounded like remembering. After they hung up, Grace sat in her quiet apartment and thought about endings, about how 32 years could become nothing in an afternoon, about how love and power could never really coexist because one required trust and the other demanded control. She thought about Vincent, about a boy who'd inherited violence and called it legacy, about how trauma passed through generations like heirlooms, getting heavier with each exchange. And she thought about Rosa, about a woman who'd tried to save her son by loving him and her soul by loving others, and had lost both in the end. The truth doesn't break people. The pretending does. January came. Snow in the city looked gray immediately, like everything eventually does when it's covered in the residue of living. Grace's phone rang late one night. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Grace, this is Anthony, Vincent's associate. Her blood went cold. How did you get this number? Vincent wants to meet. No, it's not a request. Grace stood in her dark apartment, holding the phone, feeling fear curl in her stomach like smoke. If he wants me dead, just do it. Don't pretend this is a conversation. Anthony laughed. Actually laughed. Nobody wants you dead, Grace. Vincent wants to talk, that's all. About what? His mother. Grace closed her eyes. What about her? She's sick. Cancer. It came back. She's not doing well. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, colder. When? 2 weeks ago. She didn't want anyone to know, but she's getting worse, and she keeps asking for you. Grace sat down slowly. Why would Vincent care? Because she's dying, and even men like him remember their sons before the end. The line went quiet. Grace could hear her own breathing, too loud in the silence. Tomorrow, Anthony said. Noon. There's a cafe on Morrison Street. Vincent will meet you there. Just talk, that's all. And if I say no? Then Rosa dies without seeing you again. Your choice. Click. Grace sat in the dark for a long time. She went. Morrison Street was the kind of neighborhood where gentrification and poverty were still fighting for territory. The cafe was small, clean, trying to be something it wasn't quite. Vincent sat at a corner table. No suit this time, just jeans and a dark sweater. He looked older, tired, like something inside him had started breaking. Grace sat across from him without ordering anything. She's dying, Vincent said, no preamble, no small talk. Anthony told me. She's got maybe 2 months. The doctors say 6, but they're lying to be kind. Grace felt something crack open in her chest. I'm sorry. Vincent looked at her. Really looked, maybe for the first time ever. She talks about you constantly, about dinners, about the garden, about how you were the only real friend she ever had. She was more than a friend to me. I know. Vincent's hands curled around his coffee cup. I was angry. After that last dinner, I thought you were trying to manipulate her, use her affection to get something. I never wanted anything from her. I know that now. He looked away, jaw tight. My father taught me that everyone wants something. That kindness is just leverage waiting to be used. I believe that. I still believe that, mostly. But you, he trailed off. But I what? You loved her. Actually loved her. Not for what she could give you. Just because. The coffee shop smelled like burnt espresso and somebody's failed dreams. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, a man raised on violence was trying to understand Grace. I'm not going to apologize for protecting my family, Vincent said. That's who I am. That's what I do. I know. But I should have... He stopped, started again. I should have understood that she needed something I couldn't give her. Something clean. Something that didn't taste like blood. Grace looked at this man who'd inherited an empire and called it family, who'd chosen power over love, because that's what fathers teach sons when they build kingdoms on broken things. She's still proud of you, Grace said quietly. Even now, even after everything, she still loves you. I don't deserve it. Love isn't about deserving. Vincent laughed, bitter and brief. That's exactly what she always says. They sat in silence. The cafe's radio played something soft and forgettable. Will you come? Vincent asked. To see her? She keeps asking. Will you let me? I'll have Anthony pick you up, tomorrow if you want, or whenever you're ready. Grace nodded. Tomorrow's fine. Vincent stood, pulled out his wallet, left $200 bills on the table for coffee neither of them had touched. Grace? She looked up. Thank you for loving her when I forgot how. Then he left. Grace sat alone in the cafe for a long time, watching the city through grimy windows, thinking about endings and forgiveness and the strange mercy of getting to say goodbye. The final Sunday. The house on Crescent Hill looked smaller somehow, or maybe Grace had just gotten bigger, had learned to take up space in a world that had spent 68 years trying to make her invisible. Anthony drove her, didn't speak the whole way, parked in the circular driveway, let her out without ceremony. Vincent met her at the door. She's upstairs, the main bedroom. She doesn't leave it much anymore. Grace nodded, walked past him, climbed stairs she'd climbed 1,000 times carrying laundry, groceries, flowers for vases that Rosa insisted made the house feel alive. The bedroom door was open. Late afternoon light came through sheer curtains, turning everything soft and golden. Rosa lay in the bed, small under white covers, her hair thin and white against the pillow. Her eyes were closed. For a moment, Grace thought she was too late. Then Rosa's eyes opened, found her. Grace, I'm here. Grace crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, took Rosa's hand, so light now, all bone and paper skin. You came, Rosa whispered. Of course I came. I thought maybe you'd decided I wasn't worth forgiving. Rosa, there's nothing to forgive. I chose him over you. You chose your son. That's what mothers do. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I should have been braver. You were brave. You loved me out loud. You made space for me at your table. You chose kindness even when it cost you everything. It didn't change anything. Grace squeezed her hand gently. It changed me. They sat together as the light died. Grace told her about the new families she cleaned for, about her grandson who'd just gotten accepted to college, about small things that felt enormous because they were being shared. Rosa listened, smiling, crying softly. I'm so tired, she said eventually. I know. Will you stay just a little longer? As long as you want? Rosa closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed, deepened. Grace held her hand and watched the city below the hill light up like scattered stars. Downstairs, she could hear Vincent moving through the house, could hear him in the kitchen, probably making coffee he wouldn't drink, finding tasks to keep his hands busy while his mother died. Grace thought about all the Sundays, all the dinners, all the small rituals that had made 32 years feel like something more than employment. She thought about love, how it could exist inside impossible circumstances, how it could matter even when it couldn't save you. Grace, Rosa's voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. Tell me about the garden. Tell me about the roses. So Grace did. She described the garden as she remembered it, full of color and life and possibility. She told Rosa about roses that survived winter and ivy that reached heaven. She lied beautifully, because sometimes love means telling better stories than the truth allows. Rosa smiled. It sounds perfect. It was. We were happy there. We were. Rosa's breathing changed, became shallow, irregular. Grace felt her hand go lighter, as if she was already starting to leave. Rosa, stay. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. I promise. Rosa smiled, squeezed her hand one last time. Barely pressure, barely anything. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. Then she was gone. Grace sat with her as the room darkened, held her hand until it went cold. Let herself cry finally, for Rosa, for herself, for 32 years of love that hadn't been enough to change the ending, but had been enough to make the middle worth living. Vincent came up eventually, stood in the doorway, saw his mother's still face, saw Grace holding her hand. He didn't say anything, just stood there, this man built of violence and grief, and let himself be a son one more time. She loved you, Grace said quietly. Until the very end. You should know that. Vincent nodded, couldn't speak. Grace stood, released Rose's hand gently, smoothed the covers, touched Rose's cheek one last time. Then she walked past Vincent, down the stairs, out the front door, into the cool evening air. She didn't look back. Some endings don't need witnesses, they just need to be true. Epilogue. Spring came eventually, the way it always does. Grace planted flowers in the window boxes of her apartment. Nothing fancy, just geraniums and petunias that didn't require much care. She thought about Rosa every time she watered them, thought about kindness and courage and the quiet ways we try to save each other. Vincent sent a check 2 weeks after the funeral, more money than Grace would make in 5 years. A note attached, "She wanted you to have this." Grace deposited it, used some to visit her sons, gave the rest to a scholarship fund for young black women pursuing nursing degrees. Rosa would have liked that. The house on Crescent Hill sold 6 months later. Vincent didn't need it anymore. It was too full of ghosts. Grace never drove past it again, but sometimes, on Sunday afternoons, she'd make gravy the way Rosa had taught her, would fill her small apartment with the smell of basil and garlic and something that tasted like memory. And she'd think about a woman who'd loved imperfectly, but honestly, who'd tried to make space for grace in a graceless world, who'd failed maybe in the big ways, but who'd succeeded in the way that mattered most. She'd been seen, and she'd made sure others were seen too. That was worth something. That was worth everything. The truth doesn't break people. The pretending does. But love, even love that changes nothing, that still matters, even if only in the quiet of Sunday kitchens, where 2 women once made dinner together and called each other family, even if only in the memory of roses that didn't survive winter, but were beautiful while they lived, even if only in the echo of a voice saying, "Thank you for seeing me." Grace lived with that echo, and most days it was enough.